dices... Hi, everyone. Yes, I know. Can you hear me, those of you wearing mics? But some people are not wearing mics. So, welcome to this side event. Wear a headphone. So, I am very happy to welcome you to this side event. And I'm happy to make a small introduction for this wonderful panel that we will have today. Many of you have been engaged. I see a lot of familiar faces. So I think I don't need to tell you what the Alliances for Climate Action are, but just to say that the Alliances for Climate Action have been in a long journey since 2017 when they were first convened by WWF and other partners in the US. And we saw that this model was actually a very effective model of keeping climate action and climate policy alive in terms or at times when governments are supportive of climate action, but also in times where governments, national governments, might not be supportive of climate action. And I think the more we see around the world, the more evident it becomes that non-state actors, businesses, cities, investors, faith groups, cultural groups, and universities, we have all a role to play, and that they cannot be left out of this conversation. So our work is to convene alliances, to bring people together, and to articulate people who are already working in the climate space, but that sometimes are not necessarily talking to other actors. And when we come together to work in collective action, it also brings us a sense of hope, I think, a sense that we can still work together and that there are many people and many organizations around the world that are keen to make this an important agenda issue in policy and in people's everyday lives. So today I am very proud to present a report that we collected showcasing 6 examples of how the alliances in 6 countries have used their collective voice to mobilize actors from a whole society perspective to engage in climate action. And you will have a copy of the report and you can download it also on our website. But in the meantime, I am very happy today to have 4 wonderful speakers that I would like to call to the stage. So first, Manuel, welcome. Manuel is a practice leader of WWF's Climate and Energy practice, and we're very happy to have him here today. Ramiro, if you're here, thank you for being with us today. Ramiro is UN high-level champion of climate change. The Alliances for Climate Action are accelerators of Race to Zero and an implementing partner of the Marrakesh Partnership, and so we work together with the UN system. Ursula Kasperek from C40 in her role as head engagement of CHAMP. And last but not least, Rina Kui. She's the acting director of the Center of Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland. And I am going to ask, I have prepared some questions for this important group of panelists. And first question for Manuel, if you can open up the floor for us. Yes. During this week, what have you seen in terms of how subnational governments and non-state actors can push for higher ambition or any ambition in some countries in the NDC cycle? And what is the importance of multi-level governance in the implementation of NDCs and commitments?
Wow, that question has like 5 elements, but I will try to go through. So let me start by saying that what we can see here in COP29, it is the result of 10 years of effort in bringing whole of society to work together towards achieving our climate objectives. And fortunately, it's happening as well in the biodiversity and even in the desertification process, what it is fantastic. Let me complement this first idea by saying that with a lot of pride, I can say that it was in Lima 10 years ago when we launched the Action Agenda for Climate through what it used to be called the Lima Paris Action Agenda. And here, one of the captain of that idea 10 years ago, and I think that we can confirm that it was a great idea, no? Because that will move into my second element. Some people is thinking that it is not correct to have so many and crowded community coming into a COP. I think exactly the opposite. I think that it is fantastic. The last year, previous to Dubai, the Pope released what it was called Laudato Deo letter about climate, and he was talking about a more democratic multilateralism. And this is a democratic multilateralism, because we used to have in the past COPs just with negotiators. Now we have these open, very participatory COPs, and it is not because I love participation, for sure I love it. It is because this dynamic that we can continue recreating, rethinking, and even building the new mandate for the future of COPs. Because that is the only way in which we will make this Paris Agreement so resilient to the political, geopolitical, and economic difficulties. So it is needed to have this kind of participation to recreate the spirit and the outcomes of a COP. But that moves me to the third, that it is about the role of the non-state actors. And when we think about non-state actors, we are talking about civil society, we are talking about business sector, we are talking about subnationals. And look, we have already seen how important subnational governments can be to sort political difficulties, but also to build a bottom-up process. And that is one of the values of the Action Agenda, that it can fit the top-down coming from the global decisions towards domestic implementation, and the bottom-up that means to bring from the people working in some place in a subnational government, identifying their needs and building up. And the point is, how can we make that balance to happen? For sure, because of the current economic, geopolitical, and political difficulties of the process, we can see that there is a new window of opportunity for the process. So I hope that for the coming years, the Alliance for Climate Actions can be strengthened. But I have I don't know in which number I am, fifth, no? A fifth element to describe that it is that the Action Agenda and the Alliance for Climate Action, it has been always sought as a tailor-made mechanism. So it is not an imposed mechanism. The idea it is to have in every country or in every subnational government defining the role that they are planning to play. I was reading the report about the Alliance for Climate Action, and I have seen Argentina, it is more because of focusing on subnationals to continue with some policies. Chile, it was more in the municipal level. Japan, it is more national, and it has been for defining carbon pricing policies. The UAE, it is more thematic. It is to accelerate electric vehicles transition. America or the United States, substantive federal policies. And Vietnam, to create a link in between national and local government. So it's showing how tailor-made this instrument can be. and I think that is fantastic. Let me finish with a last idea. We will have soon the new cycle of the NDCs. And we know, fortunately, we have just seen the UK presenting a really ambitious pledge target of 81% of emissions reduction by 2035. That is the way forward. But that is not happening around the world. So the Alliance for Climate Action must be more able to create the economic and the social and the political case to strengthen NDCs. Because we cannot continue failing in strengthening NDCs as a way to put the world well on track. Let me finish this intervention by honoring a good friend here that it is hidden behind some other, Mariana Panuncio, super good friend that for many years used to be, and she was one of those strong pillars to make the action agenda and the Alliance for Climate Action possible. Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you very much, Manuel, for setting the scene for us. And now if I can turn to Ramiro. In your role as UN high-level champion team, what opportunities do you see for multi-level collaboration? And what lessons can you share as the non-state actor agenda also moves from ambition to implementation? And before you start responding, I'm going to sit next to you.
Please join me. Welcome. I'm going to take this out. Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here as the campaign director with the Climate Champions team that we support the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions. I myself am not the climate champion. That is Nigar Al-Padare and Rassan Al-Mubarak, just to be sure, because if not, I will be overstepping my role. But I would also like to address this conversation with another hat, which is having the privilege to be one of the founding members of the Argentinian Alliance for Climate Action, alongside with Diego Carlos. So seeing the success and the progress of an implementation of an alliance in action in one specific country. So very, very pleased and honored to be here with you today. And let me start addressing your question about the pivot from commitments to implementations. As you said, the alliances are an accelerator of Race to Zero. Race to Zero is the world's largest campaign of non-state actors committed to reach net zero by 2050, and contributing to halving global emissions by 2030. We have more than 15,000 members today working under different partner initiatives in the campaign. And if there is something that we learn and we've seen in this campaign alongside these 4 years, it is first that many of these actors and companies and entities have make their commitments, knowing in response to what the science says that is required, and knowing that making these bold commitments would help to sort of encourage others, and taking a lot of a pioneering role. But as soon as they start on the implementation phase, they all realize that none of them can reach their goals and their targets on their own, because net zero is a game that requires a whole of society approach. And if a company makes a net zero commitment, it has to engage with the value chain, it has to engage in the regions and areas it operates. It requires some enabling policy and regulations that will allow them to reach that goal and that target. Immediately they see and understand that the only way these entities can reach their goal and commitments to net zero, it is through collaboration. And this is the area where setting up the institutional partnerships like the alliances play a critical role. And we were talking this morning with Sergio about how we can move forward and engage with the Japan Climate Initiative and start strengthening that collaboration between cities, regions, financial institutions, and the industries that operate in that region. And how by having these sort of shared goals and commitments, we can accelerate the implementation much faster. To me, that is the more deeper need for this campaign on the way forward, and the role where these alliances are critical. And one final very common here, I think the second area where they are critical, it is, as was thought in the early days on the road to Paris, as a backup strategy. When we know political will change, how we can move this and have non-state actors that they still committed to make action. Like America is all in, is to me a great source of inspiration of this. Unfortunately, again, for the second time.
Thank you, Ramiro. So I would like to turn to Ursula now and ask you, Ramiro just mentioned this idea that we need to work also with subnational governments, activate them to own their own role in meeting the national targets, in decarbonizing their territories, but also we know it's not the national governments alone, it's not the subnational governments alone. Then we need to bring also different levels of the subnational, so whether it's the province or the state, the municipalities, no? Sometimes they are same parties, sometimes there are different parties. And then not only that, but there's also businesses that operate in those regions, and there's specific groups that are part of what we call the real economy, no? And we know that the NDC targets, I like to think that they land somewhere. They are not like, they are abstract things, but then we need to bring them down to a specific place. So in your role as a CHAMP leader, have you perceived greater awareness about how multi-level partnerships look like in practice and not only in an abstract concept? And also, how can they help to align policies and investments at municipal, regional, national levels? And what barriers do you see that are still there and that maybe the Alliances for Climate Action can help to overcome?
Okay, so I think I have three components of the question myself. For those who do not know what CHAMP is, it's a coalition for high ambition multi-level partnerships, a mouthful, but it has been launched last year at COP28 in UAE, and so far we have 74 national governments who made an open commitment to work with their subnational governments, so cities, states, regions, towns, to really accelerate the delivery of climate action on the ground. Quite a lot of the components of the pledge are around NDC inclusion and development jointly. However, there are provisions there that really talk about implementation and investment. And this is not a new concept. Let me start with that, okay? Because CHAMP was conceived last year, but we have all been working in this space for years. And I think what it really does is just shines the light on systems that already exist and make us aware that that implementation happens whether we like it or not. And it can be implemented in line with Paris Agreement, or it can be implemented, the action, the infrastructure development, it can be implemented in a way that is not necessarily something that will support the goals of Paris Agreement. Legislative structures in countries devolve the responsibilities to different levels of governments. So in Korea, there is a legislation which sort of filters through the responsibility for action plans to the subnational level, and that existed prior to CHAMP. But CHAMP is a vehicle for us to really shine the light on that structure and say, look, this is already happening, and that's actually a good practice, which we probably might have not noticed had we not done this initiative before. Or maybe we wouldn't openly talk about it in spaces like COP or other forums. So those are some of the examples where CHAMP is a vehicle that enables us to discover that actually a lot of multi-level action is either legislated or just happens anyways in the countries because it makes sense. Because again, this crowd probably knows very well that implementation happens at the local level, and ultimately whatever is decided on top will filter its way down to the bottom. And the local leaders have some level of freedom to decide how to implement those powers. And I think CHAMP is really about making sure that this is all in line with Paris Agreement and driving towards the collective goal. And I think the growth, yes, I think what we are finding out is more awareness about this collaboration, and just a conscious decision to do it together. You know, I think that's what we are seeing since last year. It is, of course, not without its barriers. It's as with everything. If any of you worked in a government at any point in your lives, you know that speaking with a colleague from other department is not that easy, you know, unless you sit next to them and have a coffee. But actually, everyone has their own little piece of the pie, and we work on that piece of the pie. But what we need to do, and what CHAMP is really teaching us, is we need to open up that pie and start chatting with each other, not only within the government, but across the government. So if it's already hard to do it within one layer, how difficult it is to do it with others. And sadly, that often costs money. Not massive amount of money, because maybe it's a workshop, maybe it's a day when you connect with other people, but that's the resource that often is not there to facilitate that. So what we do with CHAMP, we actually come in certain geographies and try to support that facilitation. In Colombia, for example, we worked with GIZ and WRI to facilitate the exchanges between different stakeholders in 5 locations, so that they can work with their national government on the NDC development. So really creating that space for such for such interchange. In Brazil, we have partnered with federal government for this Green and Resilient Cities program, which is fantastic, announced in the summer. And there, we will be working to identify 50 cities where we have one mitigation and one adaptation action that really can be then sort of put in the market and raised funds for, because we know that sometimes those technical capacity constraints are just something that needs to be overcome. So just a few examples. I can list probably more barriers, like lack of good quality of data. That's also often a problem that sadly trickles down or trickles up. So if the data is not great at the local level, then the reporting is not great, and then the things are skewed. So those are the things that have impact, and I think CHAMP is helping us to really identify some of those problems and unclog those things that, sometimes they are simple, sometimes they are a bit more difficult. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think with your last point, you opened up to the reason that we've been engaging with Rina and her team at the Global Center for Sustainability at the University of Maryland, because although we understand the science, like our core job in the alliances is to articulate and to mobilize people and to help create narratives and understandings. But we need like raw material for that, and we need to know what are the goals that we want to advance, and also how, as you said, Ursula, to make sure that we have reliable data, that this data is, of course, reliable, that it's understandable, and that ultimately it helps to make decisions and to convince people or to engage people to also take action. And so I want to ask you, can you explain and tell us a little bit about how the Center for Global Sustainability has been working as analytical partner of America is All In to draft the sectoral pathways for decarbonization, and how that has allowed to see where emissions can be done and in what period of time, and also about your international work, because you are not only working in the US territory, but looking at different countries. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you, Luli and ACA, for organizing this panel. I'm really glad to be here. Also, congrats on the report. I think, as Luli mentioned, we are a long time partner with America's All In. So I very familiar with the U.S. context, but I eager to learn what's happening in other countries, all the networks, and see the opportunities. And we can come back to the U.S. context later. But as Luli mentioned, we have been leading the modeling for America's All In, actually from America's Pledge time 7 years ago. To really develop the concrete policy pathways for the transition. One of the important modeling tool we use is called an integrated assessment model, which produced a forward-looking pathway. So you can understand how you can make consistent decision and action today, and what are the path, what are the policy actions step by step to achieve emission reduction. And also it can give you some benchmark about what a high ambition means at the country level, but also importantly in the US, we have a 50-state resolution of the US embedded in a global model. So we can explicitly model the subnational action in the US and understand how all of those policies are contributing to the US ambition. So I think that part, it's important for the subnational to really know the action they are doing is making a difference, is contributing to the US 50% target for the 2030. So I think that's the feedback we got a lot from the coalition, kind of a understanding, even though there's different context for the subnational leaders, but it's benchmark kind of a effect that providing that information to them is very useful. And our international work, we also start to think about how we can doing similar type of analysis in other countries. Although we have country work for a long time, mostly with local domestic research team like us. So I think we don't go there just do research. I think it's very important that we understand the country context. So we often work with research team like university counterparts in countries, Indonesia, India, China, Brazil, for example. Those are the key meeting countries. But I think we do want to think about the opportunity, bring in the more subnational level analysis to the international context. And I think, like earlier mentioned, that the opportunities, challenges are actually different across countries. So we do need to understand and thinking about the bottom-up analysis in different country contexts. When we talk about NDC ambition, when we talk about 1.5 aligned, it's different across country context, and we need to take into practicality. And there's a lot of really great progress on renewable energy, but I think it's also create a lot of confidence in all the countries. But I think it's also need to think about what are the different kind of a near-term barriers to do all of that. I'll stop there, but we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ramiro, I would like to come back to you because, of course, data is always important and we use it, and that's our point of departure in a way, and often our destination too, no? But how to get from point A to point B, we need something in the middle. And one of those key elements is, I think, powerful storytelling and organized campaigning and mobilizing, being able to mobilize sometimes large number of actors, other times the key actors, no? But in your role as campaign director, can you talk a little bit about how this is a key ingredient of collective action, mobilization, and powerful storytelling?
Sure, happy to share this. And I think we all need to be aware that to address this climate crisis and respond to it on time, we need to work in multiple layers. On one side, it is accelerate the implementation phase of what you're doing, and we were just talking about. We also need to work at the policy level and deliver and enhance policy and regulation. But there is another layer that it is building and creating the right narratives and showing the stories of success in a way that we do bring a whole of society approach, and we create the mass mobilization that is needed. Because pioneering actors taking action, and action on themselves is really good. Policy and regulation is very good, but the transformation we need to do in the next 5-10 years, it is so structural that it does require us to be very effective on telling the narratives and the stories that it works. And we, at least from Race to Zero, feel very proud of being able to see how what it was a niche scientific concept, like net zero, like buried under the IPCC, move from that niche difficult concept to becoming the main measure of target and commitment if you want to be a non-state actor committed on climate action today. So that mass mobilization, which, to be frank, started in the most weird conditions that we would ever thought. The campaign was launched in the middle of the global pandemic, when in a moment where people were telling us, don't do it. Don't launch your campaign right now with an abstract concept like net zero in the middle of the global campaign. And those days, we're also addressing all the Black Lives Matters movement. So the champions were told, you're going to sound deaf if you're launching this climate weird commitment right now. But they did it. They stick to the commitment because we're running on the way to Glasgow. And we reached Glasgow with already been this mass mobilization. So we need to work, I would say, be brave, have very strong communication skills, and stick to your target. Stick to your target. And we need to create those narratives if we want to engage the society and show that it is the best strategy of development that we have, or the only strategy of development that we have on the way forward. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that, as we've seen in our alliances, that sometimes, we can take like those big common ideas, but then the way in which we explain it and we make it real for the people also changes context to context, no? And I think that this is where a powerful and diverse team as our, with our members that are so diverse, comes in, because then we can make it our own, no? In the different countries, in Mexico, Argentina, Japan, very different economies, very different values in society, different mechanisms. And so sometimes we need to, in some contexts, is more successful than others. And, it's like also this adjustment that we need to be doing, or like pivoting and trying new things. So Ursula, I would like to come back to you, and also in maybe if you can share with us a little bit about successful stories, also in the same line of how we show success, but also I want to bring up a point that was brought to me by one of our members that is here today, and she said, like, this COP is good, it's very inspiring, but at the same time I feel like it's all very positive, like, oh, we're doing great, but I need to talk more about like the challenges and what is difficult and how to overcome it and to get good ideas. So I don't know if you can talk about, you already mentioned a few specific cases, but maybe you can say a little bit more about what you see working.
I can talk for a very long time, so that's a dangerous question for me. I will maybe give a few examples. So I think I will say that in terms of the CHAMP, the coalition that I mentioned, I wouldn't want to attribute certain successes to that initiative at this stage because it's been launched last year. So I think we just are working on this. We can say that Brazilian and DC have seen the mention of strong commitment to working with climate federalism. That's what they said, which I was very happy to see. But I will take this a bit more home in terms of success stories in that collaboration between mayors. So I was in Philippines, where I was very happy to attend one of our C40 regional academies, and there was a mayor of Quezon City and mayor of Sierra Leone. mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone, and they had a lot of conversations and learned from each other about urban farming initiatives. And it wasn't all roses. It wasn't all, oh, it's such a great thing. They were actually talking about challenges and how they could learn from each other, being in different parts of the world, but some of the challenges are actually common and can be overcome through those conversations. So that exchange, mayor to mayor, can really help. Another example of a success story that perhaps was required a lot of work. In Denmark, the municipalities have worked with the national government to develop the climate action plans. It's called DK 2020, and it's filtering down the sort of the Paris Agreement goals and making sure that the municipal plans are aligned. Those stories are fantastic to share in forums like this, but the amount of work that went into development of those plans and consultations with local communities, it was not easy. But I think what gives us hope in coming to COP and sharing those stories is the fact that some of the challenges that people had to overcome, we share with them. The amount of time, I see people approaching after presentations and being like, oh my God, we have the same problem, can we chat? And then the chat happens. I used to work in Scottish government, and we worked on a legislation for district heating. So, cities very much rely on heat, so we worked on that. Amount of consultation we had in order to not only stimulate investment. You said about investment in my first question, which I probably didn't address, but there was a constant conversation with the business community, with communities who live already in buildings with district heat that might not be that effective, with faith groups, for example, as well, and also with the UK government, who sort of had powers over some elements of that law. And working as a state government with cities to understand the financial implication of regulation, because it's not cheap, and any regulation will bring some cost, admin cost. This is not like, maybe creation of the bill is free. I think I heard that somewhere at the panel. I think you were at this event. You were speaking. I don't know if that's your quote actually, but the creation of the bill is free. But what follows is going to generate some costs. So I think understanding the burden and barriers or things that are generated by that is crucial, because then you can actually mitigate that or address it at the source. So I don't know if I told you success stories, but I've given you a bit of a tour around the world that we do speak with each other, and I think that conversation can generate a lot of interesting ideas. And I think this is why people like COPs, because you can talk with people and exchange those ideas and really learn new things. Even though you are exhausted, you still learn, and I think that's what's beautiful about it.
Thank you. This is very true. And thank you also for bringing it to, I don't know, the real world job that we do, no? Because it's like, there's always the abstract concepts, but then it's like, so actually how does this look in practice? Convenings, meetings, consultations, and sometimes I think for us who are like kind of like underground, it's important also to have tips and tricks on how to implement and how to lead on certain processes. And Rina, I would like to come back to you in also learning more, if you can provide examples about how the data that you have developed, how it has helped to mobilize public support, and also if you can say something about like the effect that it has on people that are being engaging, as they engage with the data or with the numbers, and how this shifts also their understanding of a problem or of a solution.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So I do want to talk about how we did analysis on US 2035 NDC this year. Although the context changed and we may update our analysis. So in the past couple months, actually starting from beginning of this year, we did a very extensive stakeholder consultation process with all the America's All In coalition member to present our preliminary results about a concrete policy pathway towards what a high ambition target may look like for the US. And with both new policy and from both federal and the subnational level, we see the number is 65%. We already published that in September at New York Climate Week. And I think through that stakeholder consultation process, we kind of asked the members to give us feedback about whether the policy level we are modeling are realistic, whether that's the tool you have, and also help them to understand what 65 mean. Like when you see a national target there, you kind of how that related to me. I think that part is really helpful for people to understand, oh, actually there are a lot of policies, implementation I can take, and then that's contributing to the national ambition. So I think that's all very helpful. I think we do see there's still a lot of hope, like from the subnational action in the US can still make that emission reduction meaningful. Even with absent or rollback a federal leader, we are definitely updating some of the analysis to help promote, kind of give that excitement again, kind of to all the subnational leaders. So collectively, how much a difference we can still make. So I think that's a very important message at this point with all the members. We also work very closely with our own state, the state of Maryland. Through that, we also do a lot of listening sessions across the state, so you can also see different constituents. They may have their own challenges to really, for sure, I admit there's a disconnect between modeling with like a real world challenges. So I think it's a both way communication when you actually do those exercises. So that's why I think, research team and coalition, this is a very nice kind of a partnership that we developed with America's All In, and hopefully we can bring that model or kind of learn that model from other countries to do this work. So really look forward, see if there are ideas and that can trigger from today's conversation. And thank you.
Thank you. And to wrap up, Manuel, because I know this has been a really inspiring, I think, conversation, and it gives us with a sense of that there is still a lot of work to do, but I get the feeling from what you all mentioned that we are, at least from the non-state actor perspective, like we are on the right track in terms of the work that we're doing in bringing up actors together from multiple sectors, working to promote multi-level coordination, to focus attention on the NDCs, on net zero. So what would you offer as a closing reflection in terms of how the Alliances for Climate Action can continue to support this transition to a resilient net zero society?
Thank you, Luli, and thank you to you all. So I will try to wrap up not only by taking some of the ideas on what we have just heard, but also combining the idea with the coming challenges. So let me start by saying that something that I think it is clear because of this fantastic panel, it is that the Alliance are kind of translators. So are translating what it is happening in this debate to the domestic level. And that is so, so important because, as you have just mentioned, many things are happening in these rooms. It is not just what it is happening in the negotiator side. It is what it is happening around this whole venue, in which there are new good ideas, new initiatives, in which we can smell quickly what are the new trends of the process, because it is not just about knowledge. It is about smelling trends, using the intuition. Sometimes ago, I used to say to a friend, because it was the celebration of the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther, that when he put the complaints to the church 500 years ago, he was using knowledge, intuition, and faith. And that is what the Alliances for Climate Action must do, to use their knowledge to identify because of the intuition, what is coming, and to use the faith that things are possible to happen. So that is my first conclusion, that I think it's very challenging even for the future. That moves me to the second, and I won't attribute this phrase, but for me it's fantastic. Nobody votes in any country because of the NDC. So nobody will win the election by saying, look, friends, electors, I approve an NDC. No, nobody's cares, probably, no? Nobody knows what does it means, the NDC. So in that translation role, also it is so important, and probably that is very challenging for the current time. We have to translate things in a way that are understandable for people on the ground. If not, it will be very difficult to have them as good allies to demand to government to do things. I think that in some way what happened in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, it is a model on how to connect a climate objective with something that it is a big concern for US citizens, inflation. No? So it's so interesting that the most important climate law of the United States, it has been titled with an economic title. And also that it is related to promote access to the poorest people, to give credits, to give tax exemption, and by doing that at the same time to combat inflation. So those are the kind of connections that we are not used to doing too much. And I think that the Alliance for Climate Action should understand that it is not just to translate, because if we will continue using the same words, nobody will understand us, but to translate, to connect with people on the ground. That is a big challenge for the future. But also, what we have heard it is that the alliances have been very instrumental in organizing sectorial transitions or sectorial pathways. And I think that the alliances have to continue working on that. And by now, not only for the climate purpose, but even for the biodiversity one. Because as we know, the biodiversity transformational sectors or transitions, I don't know, will come soon because of the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services report, probably by the end of this year or early next year. So the combination of those transitions will be very important for the alliances, and also to make the economic case, as it has been in many places, and even in the UAE because of our own alliance with electric vehicles. So that is something also that it must be part of the process for the future. So also something that I have heard, it is that, I think that you mentioned it, it's so important not only to translate, to connect with people, to organize transformational things, but to identify barriers. Because we are not starting from scratch when it is about a national government or a subnational government. Probably there are many, many, many regulations, former policies that are limiting things. And we do need to be instrumental in identifying those limits, because if not, it won't work. That is clear. It won't work. And look, somebody, even an authority, don't know what is creating the obstacle. Let me share with you an anecdote. I used to be Minister of the Environment of Peru for 5 years. And when I went to some place for some activity, somebody approached me and asked me or told me, Minister, do you know that we cannot recycle PET because there is like a 20-year-old regulation that it is limiting that? And I didn't know. Even more because that regulation, a 20-year-old regulation, it was enacted by the Ministry of Health. And I used to be Minister of the Environment. And look what I did, because sometimes we have to be humble. Please send me that rule. So it is not that I said I will, no, I know it. No, I didn't know. Please send me that rule and I will see what to do. This guy sent me the rule, and 2 weeks after that, we canceled that rule. and they started to recycle. So it is important to identify what is creating those kind of obstacles and act, because even the authority don't know what is creating the problem. And sometimes when it is about transition, it could be not only because of rules, it could be because of contracts, it could be because of concessions, it could be because of so many things. And most of the times are not directly referred to your topic. Sometimes it is an indirect direction that can create that obstacle. So I really appreciate that you have brought these things of addressing barriers and also understanding the cost, no? So identifying the cost of what we are planning to do. Two last things: data. Data, it is key. No? Yesterday with Rama, we were in a panel discussing data for resilience, and as a way also to create more democratic processes and to empower communities. No? And when I was thinking before of that panel, and I was talking with a colleague, where is Nadia from the UAE, she shared with me something, those kind of important information. You know that in January, there were a flood in Dubai, big flood. And because of that flood, many electric vehicles were damaged. And because of that damage, now the cost of the insurance, it has been doubled. And because of that, nobody wants to buy electric vehicles. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? So because of a climate extreme event, nobody is looking to buy something that could help to combat. So those are the kind of things that we do need to address, those contradictions on the daily life. So it is data what we do need to have to know how to manage those difficulties, because this is not a linear process. It is not. And it will never be linear and easy. It will be a process with a lot of caveats and difficulties and obstacles, and it is with data that we can be more able to sort with all of that. And collaboration, for sure, it is one of those key things. So thank you very much. I think that you will close, but for my side, thank you very much. And congratulations for so fantastic examples on how much the different alliances have worked in different levels, national, subnational, municipal, in different sectors, in policies or in the ground or on the ground. That is the fantastic benefit of the Alliance for Climate Action. So go ahead, continue working on this. Again, it is because of this kind of participation that we will sort any political difficulty. That will be the way. It is by strengthening this level of action to sort with any governmental political difficulty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for you all for being here today with us, and for you all. And since most of the people sitting here are part of the ACA community in one way or another, I would like that, of course, we have a picture, but we have a picture with everyone. Vale, can you take a picture of us with them, please? And Sergio, do you have your 6350 camera? Hey!